Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought that I would review this little video that I found very particularly interesting. And in this topic today, and I am going to tend to release probably a few videos today, a few videos that I found very particularly interesting, especially by the channel of DontesBoxingNation. And what we're going to see today, or at least talk about, is the potential of the future of the heavyweight division. And of course, for what we know, the heavyweight division right now, in my view, it is very competitive, it is very talented. But the two best heavyweight fighters in the world right now, at least at the current moment in time, would have to be A, Mr. Tyson Fury, and B, Mr. Oleksandr Usyk, because those are the only two heavyweights at the current moment in time that have any sort of belts within that division. And hopefully, with any luck, we do get to see that unification fight to see who truly is the best once and for all. Now, I do believe that Tyson Fury is a natural heavyweight, not even just a heavyweight, but a super heavyweight, and Oleksandr Usyk is pretty much a cruiserweight. But another fight that I think that would be very particularly interesting, whether Oleksandr Usyk wins or loses that fight against Mr. Tyson Fury, would be the Deontay, the Bronze Bomber Wilder fight. Another fight that I also think would be very interesting is AJ Anthony Joshua versus Deontay Wilder, but someone within one of my videos, when I did do a video about that recently, I believe someone said that, I would much rather see Deontay Wilder versus Andy Ruiz or Deontay Wilder versus somebody else because, in my opinion, Anthony Joshua is done. And you never know. Certain fighters, they react to certain losses differently. It all depends on how you think of it and how you come back. So we'll see overall what happens. But Deontay Wilder apparently recently said that he would not mind fighting Oleksandr Usyk. I would love to see that fight as well, just to see how those two styles will clash, because Deontay Wilder, in my opinion, once again, he pretty much is the George Foreman of this era. That's what he is. And a lot of people, of course, may compare Mr. Oleksandr Usyk to the Evander Holyfield of this era, because Evander Holyfield started off at cruiserweight, and then eventually, of course, he got some very decent wins at the heavyweight division, like over that of a Mike Tyson, and like that also over that of a Riddick Bowe, at least I believe, in the second match out of the trilogy, even though he did lose the other two. And he probably had a couple of other decent wins that I personally can't remember at the current moment in time. But overall, a big part of the reason why I also wanted to review this video is not only to talk about what I believe would go down in that fight, or how good of a fight, in my view, it would be, but we're also going to see what Mr. DontesBoxingNation has to say still about the Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder dynamic and situation. And what you're still going to see is that Dante is still going to allege that Deontay Wilder was cheated in that fight. And like I said, Dante and these guys are never going to give full credit to Tyson Fury, because they were only giving credit to him when they thought of him as an asset. And I always tell people this all the time. Whenever I do videos on Canelo Alvarez or Tyson Fury or anything like that, they may give credit to certain fighters like that of a David Benavidez, but as soon as David Benavidez becomes an actual threat to debatably being an all-time great, especially over certain black fighters of this generation, they are going to go after their throats. They are going to go after their jugular. It just is what it is. Because once again, you notice that they love to hype up David Benavidez and George Kambosos, certain guys that defeated certain fighters that, all in all, that defeated the guys that they wanted to be defeated. But as soon as those guys became threats, all of a sudden they went for their jugulars immediately. Immediately. So it just is what it is. And Oleksandr Usyk and Tyson Fury are no different. Once upon a time, Tyson Fury was looked at overall as the lesser of the two evils, because Anthony Joshua, who was the British black fighter, he was looked to be debatably the best heavyweight in the world. And they had to use Tyson Fury over that, and they basically said, well, Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder, this is a fight between the two best heavyweights. And then Tyson Fury actually pulled a surprise out of his ass and actually gave Deontay Wilder not only a very tough fight in the first fight, but Deontay Wilder probably should have lost that fight very easily on the scorecards. And ever since then, Tyson Fury, because he's a Caucasoid and they did not expect him to do that good, he has basically been enemy number one, or he's been on their shit list ever since then. And that's just the bottom line of the situation. So not only are we going to see Mr. DontesBoxingNation try to overall still allege that Deontay Wilder got cheated, because they were always going to try to promote him as the number one guy of this generation for the heavyweights. But number two, they're going to try to degrade Tyson Fury's legacy in every way possible. And I'm also going to release another video later on about that today. So it should be very interesting. But anyways, let's see what Mr. DontesBoxingNation has to say. Let's get into it.
Dante's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? So you heard Deontay Wilder say that he would like the Usyk fight. He's already said that he wants to now fight 3 times a year. But in order for all of that to come to fruition, he has to first get past Helenius, which is not a guarantee win, especially when you're coming off of 2 knockout losses back to back. You know, I've always told you guys.
I agree with you, Dante. I think that that's a very decent point, and that's why I don't get after someone like a Deontay Wilder for going after someone like a Robert Helenius. And you should keep that same energy when Teofimo Lopez, when he was going to fight that of a Pedro Campa. But Dante did not keep that same energy with Teofimo Lopez or Canelo when they just suffered recent losses because they don't have the complexion for him. They don't have the complexion for his protection. All right? Let me also state this, because I get certain people on my channel here and there to where they say, oh my God, you're actually stating that a black fighter has the complexion for the protection. You don't know what you're talking about. Any fighter can have the complexion for the protection. It just depends on what target audience that you're talking about. If you're talking about ESPN or if you're talking about the Zone, then yes, more than likely, certain fighters, especially of that of the Caucasians, you know, when it comes down to or other fighters, because they may want to connect with that demographic when it comes down to it. Yes, those fighters on those certain networks, they may overall have a little bit more of the complexion for the protection. And I've also had certain people tell me, well, you know, the complexion for the protection is really something fake. It's just all about skill. Well, let me state this. I don't agree with that either. I do believe that the complexion for the protection is a real life thing. And I do think all in all, certain fighters or certain athletes do get treated differently depending on what demographic they are or where they may come from. It just is what it is. I don't think that it's anything to get up in arms about. It is a real thing, but if you're a commentator, when it comes down to it, or if you're supposed to be somewhat professional within your field, then overall you cannot do that. You have to have some sort of logic and objectivity. And Dante's Boxing Nation, once again, he'll always try to spew this bullshit to you that he tells nothing but the truth and the whole truth. No, what Dante does when it comes down to it is that basically he protects every black American fighter that he possibly can. Whether he's asked backwards or whether overall he is actually telling the truth. And that's why he went on that bullshit narrative that Deontay Wilder was allegedly cheated when he never was. Okay, he never was. But anyway.
Since day one, when it comes to Deontay Wilder, he's not known for his skill. It's his willpower. His willpower in that right hand, it makes up for his lack of skill in the ring. Before Deontay Wilder...
Well, you weren't saying that shit, Dante, when you were ranking Deontay Wilder as a top 5 pound-for-pound fighter. Once again, I find it very interesting. For those of you that go back that long, and maybe we're watching clips of Dante here and there, and I watch these channels sometimes, mainly overall, once again, to expose certain narratives, and I'll do the same thing with ESPN or a tennis channel or certain things, because those are the main sports that I watch, or NBA basketball. I watch Skip and Shannon a lot of the times, because I think overall it is appropriate overall to watch some of these things. That way we can accommodate history in a proper way. Okay, that way this bullshit narrative doesn't get spread for years upon years upon years. That's a big part of the reason why I do the things on my channel that I do, because so many people believe in disinformation, and at least I'm here to tell the truth, at least from my perspective. That's not me saying that we're going to agree on everything, but let's not forget, once upon a time, new media, this includes Aki TV, Boxing Eagle, and Dante's Boxing Nation, and that of the LDBC, they all had Deontay Wilder once upon a time as a top 5 pound-for-pound fighter. But as soon as Tyson Fury, overall, the Caucasian British fighter, as soon as he beat Deontay Wilder, all of a sudden, Deontay Wilder, oh, well, he was never known for his skill. Well, we all knew that a long time ago. But we all know that Deontay Wilder, that he was a big threat for his generation. Now, if you want to make the point to where, you want to say, well, if you're going to call Deontay Wilder a bum, then why do you give Tyson Fury so much credit? That's not a bad point at all. If you were the same person that was calling Deontay Wilder a bum when it comes down to it, then how can the Deontay Wilder win be that big on Tyson Fury's record? But for those of us that were accommodating things in an objective and a logical light, we all know that Deontay Wilder was at least a decent heavyweight champion of his era. Was he someone that was, the most strategic? Was he someone that was ever known for his great skill set? No, he wasn't. But once again, that's why I compared Deontay Wilder a lot of the times to George Foreman. Deontay Wilder is the George Foreman of this era, just a lesser version. That's all he is. And that's still a very decent fighter. So that is an A-grade win on Tyson Fury's record. Wilder, at his best, was in that A-grade range. I don't know if you would rank him A plus, A to A minus. That's all up to you. But he was one of the better and more dominant heavyweights of the past 10 plus years.
Lost to Tyson Fury. If you obviously were to compare Deontay Wilder to all the other active black champions, and not even just champions, but other black prospects and contenders from America in particular, there was no doubt Deontay Wilder was the least skilled fighter. But his heart and determination could match any of those fighters on that list.
Right, but Deontay Wilder wasn't just dangerous because overall he had that. He also had a right hand that can knock out anybody on planet Earth. It is what it is. So that's also a big part of the reason. That's why I say Deontay Wilder was the George Foreman of this era. He was not super strategic. He was not a plan B fighter. He did not have a multitude of game plans. He was not very multi-dimensional. But what Deontay Wilder did have was one hell of a plan A. If he hit you overall with that right hand, or if he was able to hit you, if he was able to dominate you, if he was able overall to pressure you a little bit, he could be very, very dangerous. Okay? So it is what it is.
Second chapter of Deontay Wilder's career begins October.
But there's a reason, once again, why Dante is basically stating that, oh, well, Deontay, he was basically the weakest of the black champions, so that's basically all Tyson Fury beat. That's basically what Dante is trying to say. Basically, the reason why he's stating this is because he does not want it to appear that Tyson Fury was an all-time great fighter or that Fury did not beat a decently great fighter. But remember, never forget, once upon a time, Deontay Wilder was ranked within their top 5 pound for pound.
15th against Robert Helenius, and I truly believe ever since Tyson Fury cheated in that second fight, Deontay Wilder has never been the same, and he never will be the same.
Well, Tyson Fury never did cheat in that second fight, and I think that you know that, Dante, but I think that you wanted to believe it. I think that maybe there was a part of you that maybe believed it at first, but I think even shortly after that, you knew that it was a little bit too far with some of the stuff that Deontay Wilder was saying, but you wanted to believe it a great amount, and now I don't think that there's a great amount of part of you that truly believes it. I think that you want to believe it, and I think that you're forcing yourself to believe it. That way, overall, you can, can basically give yourself an excuse to why you said those, absolutely bogus things, but it just is what it is. And you're never going to go off that hill, and I understand it is what it is.
This is the reason why boxers that usually get caught cheating are completely banned from the sport of boxing, because it's very easy to destroy the person's career that you actually cheated against. But with that being said, this version of Deontay Wilder could still end up getting big wins, because Wilder still has the most dangerous punch in the heavyweight division when it comes to that right hand. And even if Deontay Wilder got an Usyk fight, which he most likely wouldn't get, because Usyk said he's going to retire if he doesn't get the Tyson Fury fight, and I believe him. But let's just say Deontay Wilder did get the fight, he definitely has a chance of winning, even though Usyk is way more skilled than Wilder is, just like the majority of Wilder's previous opponents were. But even with being more skilled than Wilder, you have...
Well, some of Deontay Wilder's previous opponents were somewhat more skilled than him. Usyk is on a whole nother level. So it just is what it is. Usyk is probably one of the more skilled fighters that I've personally ever seen, especially for that cruiserweight heavyweight division. Now, will he go down as one of the all-time greats? I'm not necessarily sure. We'll have to see about that. In my opinion, Tyson Fury will, because he already has the wins in his career that he needs, at least 2 all-time great wins for his generation. And some people may be like, what are you talking about? Deontay Wilder really isn't an all-time great win. Well, what I'll say is this. It was really looked at as a 50-50 fight. Not every fight is always going to be looked at on the same, because we're always going to compare to past contemporaries, and we're going to say, oh, well, this guy wasn't on this guy's level. Well, listen, at the end of the day, what truly matters is that you beat your contemporaries of your generation in those big 50-50 fights. And you can tell the difference between a fighter that did not have a lot of those 50-50 fights and a fighter that actually did. Because Tyson Fury overall did have 2 big 50-50 fights in his career, at least against 2 separate opponents. One of those being Vladimir Klitschko and another one being Deontay Wilder. The only other ones that would even come close to that would be either an AJ Anthony Joshua or an Oleksandr Usyk. That's it.
To avoid getting hit with that right hand for 12 rounds or however long the fight lasts, which is not an easy task. So Deontay Wilder definitely has one of the best equalizers in the sport of boxing. You could be winning every single round against Wilder. And it only takes one punch to change everything from Wilder.
I would agree, and that's why that fight would be so particularly interesting. Because Oleksandr Usyk, first of all, is not a natural heavyweight, but it would be very particularly interesting to see if that sleekness and overall, his speed would still be able to work against someone like that of a Deontay Wilder. And it would be very interesting to see if Wilder, even though I don't believe that he is going to beat Usyk, at least overall, I think that Usyk would probably have the slight edge because Deontay Wilder is a very big man, so it is possible. But if Deontay Wilder won that fight, I would not be shocked either. Wouldn't be shocked either.
But first, we have to see how much of Wilder is left when it comes to the Helenius fight. But I do recall leading up to the Tyson Fury, the third fight, Deontay Wilder, he leaked a little bit of sparring footage of him and Helenius, and Deontay Wilder did not look that impressive when he was sparring with Helenius. And once again, these were not clips that Helenius leaked. These were clips that Deontay Wilder's team leaked. Sometimes sparring tells the whole.
Well, has Deontay Wilder really ever looked that impressive in sparring? It is what it is. I mean, I really haven't watched Deontay Wilder spar all that much. You can watch clips against him against David Haye. You can watch clips against him against Klitschko. You can see clips, I believe, against other fighters. Deontay Wilder never looked super duper impressive, in my opinion, in sparring. He just never has.
Story. Sometime it doesn't at all. We'll find out for sure.
Well, a lot more times sparring oftentimes does not tell the full story. But a lot of the times you will use sparring as the full story, Dante, in order to plot against certain fighters that you don't like a Canelo Alvarez or a Tyson Fury. That's why you tried to allege that Tyson Fury was allegedly avoiding that of a Dillian Whyte, because apparently, and this was just off of accusations, it wasn't even off of anything proven. Dante would always say, oh, well, we know for a fact that Dillian Whyte, because of what he said, he knocked out Fury. Then the fight happens and the fight is not even competitive. So once again, it's really hard for me to respect a lot of the things that Dante tends to say, because a lot of the times he just tends to be so full of shit. It just is what it is. And half of the shit that he says, really even more than half of it, tends to be some bullshit, bogus, overall goose chase when it comes down to it, instead of anything factual. But anyway.
In October. That's all I got for now, guys. I'm on to the next one. All right, now check this out, guys.
But anyways, that's really about it for this video. I just thought that was very particularly interesting. But anyways, we will see what happens with Mr. Oleksandr Usyk and Deontay Wilder. I personally overall would love to see a Deontay Wilder versus Oleksandr Usyk fight. I think that it would be very particularly interesting. Now, do I believe that we will get to see it? Who knows? It's a possibility, but all in all, it would be difficult to make, at least at the moment. I believe more than likely that Usyk versus Fury will happen first, but we'll see what happens. But that's really about it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you all later.